degrees.
I have been thinking about a cage design for this Samurai for months, and I cannot commit to anything completely. But the time has come, we have to build it, so I'm going to start with the stuff that I know, and then we'll just work our way out from there. I would never trust someone's judgment that you see build stuff on the internet or even in person. You go to King of the Hammers, or you get on the trail, or you start to look at Google images of cages, or just go to SEMA. Once you start to learn the basic roll cage specs from a body like Ultra 4 or like, NHRA, you will see very quickly that a ton of cages are built to be eye candy and not built for safety. And it's not that they're not building them for safety. It's a lot of people don't take the time to read cage specs, and there's a lot of ego when it comes to building these kinds of things, and a lot of people think they know better because they're really good at the bender and a welder and they make really pretty work. But I promise you, it's better to make an uglier cage and be safe, because I've been in a very, very serious rollover. I was coughing up blood for a few days. My wife was bleeding out of her head, and it literally made a blood helmet out of her hair. It was a crazy experience, and it's something that I take so much more seriously now. And one day, I want to teach my kids how to wheel hard trails in this Samurai. So it's very important to me to make a cage that is ultra safe first and then looks good second. I know that there's people that don't like the traditional Jeep style B-pillar roll bar, the one piece that I just did in here. But this is the easiest way to package a safe cage, in my opinion, without going full on Ultra 4 chassis. And that's not what this is. This is not a competition vehicle. This is a recreation vehicle. But we're still gonna build it as safe as possible using the Ultra 4 spec rulebook. Get on Google. First off, I'm not giving you any advice on how to build. I'm giving you advice on how to find the information on how to build. So if you get on Google, you just type in Ultra 4 roll cage specs, or if you type in Ultra 4 rulebook, download the PDF, and you go to page 22, that's where the roll cage specs start. And you don't have to be a lawyer to read this and understand it. I would recommend reading it all the way through and talking about it with a buddy. It's gonna help you absorb this information, so once you start fabricating, there's gonna be data points that are gonna stick out to you when you start to put things together. This is super important. You should take it very, very serious. So first off, I built this out of 1 3/4. This is just our base foundation for the cage in the Samurai. We could probably get away with 1.5 in this application because it's so light. Now on the Ultra 4, specs, it says the vehicle weight under 3,200 pounds, you can get away with 1.5 120 wall. And that's actually what this was built out of whenever we got it. But we put a heavier transmission in it, we put a heavier transfer case in it, we have heavier axles, and I think that once we do all the cage work and the different things that I want to do to this to make it really, really functional off-road, I think we're going to probably break that 3,200 mark, but I'm not exactly sure. When I got it, Ian told me that when they weighed it, it was 27 or 2,800 pounds. So I'm guessing that we're going to be around 3,200. I want to play it safe. We're not competing. I don't need to pass tech inspection, but I do want to make sure that this spec would, or this cage would pass tech inspection, just for our own safety. So we built it out of 120 wall, 1.75 inch. There's always controversy whenever you bring up, should you build a roll cage out of DOM or should you build it out of welded steel? First off, do not build it out of pipe. I was a plumber for 15 years. I'm telling you right now, gas pipe, black iron pipe is not the same thing. It is way softer than like, you know, your traditional mild steel that you would get at a steel yard. This is not pipe, this is tubing. Black iron pipe is pipe. It's made to carry water or gas or fluids. This is not made to carry anything. This is made for structure, which is why it's a higher tensile strength. So anyway, this is welded. It's cheaper than DOM, and you can use welded or you can use DOM. That's completely up to you. I chose welded because the cost of these projects is insane, and the cost of tube these days is insane, and I know that this is still safe based on previous experience, and it's still meeting this spec when you're building a vehicle that could go 100 miles an hour in the desert. And then the next really important thing that I see people fail on constantly is the head clearance. A lot of people do like triangular like bracing that goes right over their head, and when I watch them wheeling off-road, their head is like 2 inches from this like supportive piece. The supportive piece would be really nice at like protecting you in a rollover, keeping your head from hitting rocks. But I am telling you, if you're that close and you're in a serious rollover and you're moving or you're rolling fast like what I was when I was in my rollover like 10 years ago, you're gonna hit your head on that stuff. And so I wanna keep my head clear. And unfortunately, the dimensions of the Samurai are so small that, you know, we need to be 3 inches from the edge of a helmet. And I'm like 2.5 inches. Like, let's see, if I was just to like have my hips completely like mounted solid with a really good harness and I was just stretching my neck because we're in a serious rollover, I mean, I'm only 2 inches from this bar. That's a huge problem. Now, do I think in a low speed rollover I'm gonna hit that? Probably not, but I do wanna make sure that me at 6'1", 225 is safe in this, even though it's an extremely small vehicle. So in order to make sure we're safe, we're gonna have to do some pretty drastic stuff. I'm gonna have to cut the rest of this firewall out so that I can move the seats together to get my head away from this. And I know it might look a little funny having the B pillar be so far behind me, but this is the best way that I can ensure that my head is not gonna come anywhere close to this B pillar in a rollover. So sometimes you have to make those decisions whether or not you want this to be safe or you want it to be good looking, and we're gonna do our best to average those two worlds together, but we're choosing safety number one. So we're gonna move the seats in a little bit closer together. And then another thing to consider whenever it comes to building a roll cage to these specs is they clearly point out they want to see a 6-point cage. We do have 6 points of contact. The front two, the A pillars, are going through and are bolted to a plate that goes to the chassis. The B pillar, we're gonna have to do that too. I've already got some Barnes plates that are on the top side and we drilled them through. So I'm gonna have to basically put some little legs that are gonna extend down to our chassis. And then the C pillars, which aren't really pillars, just a C point location for the cage that we've started on, does go all the way through, and that is gonna mount directly to the chassis. That is something that it doesn't seem like there's any wiggle room on the Ultra 4 spec. NHRA specs, they usually, if you can't mount it directly to the chassis or you're mounting to a unibody, they have a plate size that you need to stick to make sure that if you are in a serious rollover, these cage legs will not punch all the way through and make it to where you're gonna, you know, get seriously injured in a serious car accident. I'm gonna cover exo cages later in the video, just bear with me. I don't wanna do an exo cage, and I've got really good reasons why I don't recommend an exo cage to anyone unless it meets certain criteria. And that said, we will build an exo cage on a vehicle later this year, but you're gonna see exactly why when we build that exo cage that I don't recommend them for 99% of builds. crawl up in the Zook here. So you've built a bunch of race cars and trucks. You've built mini roll cages in your day, and I know you've also built some exo cages. So, what's that?
I said I hate exo cages.
I had a feeling. You and I haven't talked about this, but I because of your experience, I think that you're uniquely qualified to talk about this more than just some dude on Instagram who thinks that that exo cages are amazing and whatnot. And I haven't told anybody in the video what my opinion is necessarily. So before I tell my side of the story, I'm really curious on your perspective of exo cages.
Okay, my perspective of an exo cage is, number one, it doesn't work as a roll cage. So you cannot get proper triangulation unless you punch it through the body of the truck anyway. So if in anything, if you just put an exo cage on it, yeah, you've kind of got this shell around the outside of the truck. But if you roll the truck over, the chances are it's still going to damage the body, or B, it's going to collapse. It's not going to be a safe roll. So those are two choices, the reasons I don't like them. And then half the time I see them, they can't be welded on the backside. Like, to me, the ones that look good are so close to the body, and then they're kind of like almost part of the body.
Yeah.
But then when you're on the truck, if you go up and look at them, the outside of the tube is welded, but the inside of the tube is never welded because they can't get a welder to the inside. So it's half of a cage. It's half of a cage in my mind.
That's a really good point.
I just don't like how they look. I don't think they improve the look of a vehicle in any way.
Yeah. Yeah, and see, my perspective is the same. Like, I think that they're sometimes I see them where they look really cool, like they're intricate, like works of art, right? You can really showcase your skill as like a fabricator with a really nice looking exo cage. But when you start to learn, because I've read like the cage specs for a few different things now. Ultra 4 is the big one that I always point to, or Score or whatever. When you start to look at what the minimum requirements are to pass a tech inspection for having a safe cage, and these are minimum specs, you really quickly discover that almost can't be applied to an exo cage, at least not a solely an exo cage, right? Because like the lengths of your tubes are so long, everything is so big and broad, you would have to go through the body and make it a hybrid cage if you wanted to pass any sort of a safety spec, at least from what I can tell. And you're adding way more tube and weight. Like, I mean, it's gotta be double. Like, when you're looking at something, I mean, the Samurai, it's a challenge to do an internal cage because it's so small, but the amount of weight that I would add in order to build a full, complete, safe exo, and have it go through, like into, it's gonna have to be in here with me anyway in order to get proper triangulation and whatnot. My perspective is that it's pretty rare that I find a vehicle that it's worth doing an exo cage on. That's my perspective.
Yeah, also, you make the car wider. So if you're honest with yourself, let's say you use 2-inch tube, you're going to use 2-inch tube. You got to have it away from the body, and the point of the exo cage is to protect the body.
Yeah.
You probably need at least 2 inches of gap there.
Mm-hmm.
The tube's going to be bent in a bunch of places to get around the body. You've added almost 8 inches of width, sometimes a foot of width to the body of the car, and then it gets harder to fit through places. So, and in all honesty, if you're like a Samurai, for example, the reality is the tires are going to hit before the body hits.
Yeah.
And then the only time the exo cage is going to come into play is when you're upside down, and then you don't want an exo cage, you want a real cage.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's the thing. An exo cage will never pass tech. It just can't. Unless, like you said, it's part of an actual cage. And then you're drilling holes through the body to put a cage in it. You might as well just put a cage in it and call it a day.
I feel the same way. I have a Land Cruiser project that I'm going to be doing later this year, and I have been waffling back and forth as that being my first exo caged vehicle. Because sometimes an exo cage, I think, can make, like, it can really add a lot of cool look to a rig, and it saves like a body like that. I mean, it's huge anyway, and you could help save some of the panels, but it's like there's no way I could do a safe exo cage without going into the body, and that's why I'm thinking the same thing that you just said. It's like, well, then at that point, shouldn't you just do an internal cage and just be done with it and know that you're at least safe? So yeah, I find that it's really rare that like a build warrants an exo cage. Unless safety is not a factor at all, right? If it's just to like protect it, to keep it from rubbing on trees or something.
I think the most of the exo cages that are out there, that's what you see. But I think you could get that same benefit. Like, let's use a Tacoma as an example. You're worried about the bed on your Tacoma, don't do an exo cage. Do like a bed cage for your shocks, and then do like a rub rail that runs down the entire outside of that bed, and then incorporate it down into the rear bumper. The bumper's going to wrap that bottom corner. That's what's actually going to get damaged. You might lose a tail light occasionally, but if you just did a rub rail that was tied into a bed cage, if you did get the thing onto its side where it was going to damage the bedside, chances are you're going to pick up the tire and the rub rail and not even damage the bedside without having to add like a ladder style thing on the side and a bunch of tubes around the tail light.
Yeah.
No, I just have never seen one that made sense to me, and I've built a couple just because I had to. But even when I built them, I didn't like them when they're all said and done. Like to me, like on if you're to take your big land cruiser thing, I would be like, you know what? If you look at some of the European stuff, they use like maybe a tube on the fender, up the windshield pillar, and then it stops. And then that's just sort of like almost like a limb lifter kind of thing. That to me, that would be the most exo cage I'd ever want to have on a vehicle.
Yep. All right. Well, we don't need to beat a dead horse. Thanks for your time. We'll see you later.
All right. We'll see you in Moab, Nate.
All right, thanks. There is a ton of work left on this Samurai roll cage, but I have to pause for just a second because I called in reinforcements. I need to head up to SeaTac Airport, pick up my buddy David from Willamette Motor and Fab. He is going to help me for the next couple of days with some different odds and ends sheet metal related, so I can finish what I'm doing on the roll cage. He can get started on our new transmission tunnel, and maybe by the end of the video, I'll be able to permanently mount these seats and figure out how everything feels with a helmet. This is my friend David from Willamette Motor and Fab. He flew all the way up here from Dallas because I need an extra hand. I have way more work than I have time to do. He's gonna tackle some of the aluminum TIG work that we're gonna do building our transmission tunnel. And David, do you have anything to add?
Hey y'all, yeah, I'm gonna dust off some crusty TIG skills. Nate thinks I may have oversold my aluminum welding, but I'll figure out that tunnel.
So yeah, I'm gonna continue to work on the cage because I need to get that done. He's gonna start on that by the end of the video. I don't know, maybe I'll be helping him. We'll see how it all times out over these next couple of days. We've got the vehicle. Okay, Internet, here we go. Here's what I'm thinking. First off, we don't need all these bent tubes. This is just for pretty. Like, I'm building a lot of this for pretty. I haven't really announced it yet, but this is officially a SEMA build. This is going to be at the Power Stop brake booth. And so instead of making this a race cage, I'm churching it up a little bit, as you can see. I like bends. I think they look really nice. And so now we're at a point where the main structure and design is in, and I'm ready for the next step. I think that, Yeah, I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna throw a 45. I don't have one on me, but coming off of this tube here, tying into that tube there, and then it's gonna help back the center part of this right here. So it's gonna back this, and then if you look, there's a center bar. And the whole point of that center bar is to keep this from coming down and hitting us in the head if I roll over. This is all about protection, right? You just gotta think about what's gonna collapse and roll over. This thing, obviously not strong. I bet first, if it rolled over, it's just gonna probably come off. But what I don't want is for this to get crushed down and hit me in the head, which is why we have that goofy bar going up overhead right there. So what I'm thinking is, in order to shore up that bar and make it nice and strong, we tie it into our seatbelt bar in some way. And so in my mind, I'm seeing something bent just because we want it to not be boring. So 45, I'm seeing something right here, and then maybe even something up there where it connects above the windshield. At the end of a long day in the shop, I have the hardest time making a decision. So I wasted a whole bunch of time making some inverted gussets and some stuff that I thought would look good in my head. And then as soon as I started to place it on the cage, I didn't love it, so I didn't weld it. But when I was in this moment of indecision, at least David was getting a ton of work done on getting the permanent part of this transmission tunnel built. This is just stage one. We're gonna weld this to the floor to keep the floor nice and solid, but the next step is gonna be building a transmission tunnel that's completely removable. I wanna be able to access the transmission side of the hydraulic clutch. I wanna access, the transmission fill's gonna be easier to do if we have a doghouse to pull off. But right now, David's just getting all the legwork done so that tomorrow, him and I can go through and we could start to build out some of the funner shapes and stuff that's gonna be on a removable doghouse that's gonna fit right on top of our transmission. That's better. I think I've got a pretty nice averaging of safety and looks. I wanted to add some flair to it, and I think we have a little bit. The cage isn't done. I want to work on some other stuff and then come back and finish the cage at a later date after I have had more time to chew over how I want to do it. But we slid the seat in about 1.5 inches or so, and I mean, before my shoulder was pressed in to the targa, and now I've got a little bit of room, and I've got more head clearance up here, maybe not enough to pass Ultra 4 spec, but absolutely more than I had before. And I've got plenty of clearance up here. This feels like a really nice seat position. So right now, I'm pretty happy, all things considered. David, give me one of these. David did a great job on this transmission tunnel. And my plan, I know I'm gonna get a bunch of questions about this. My plan is to bolt these seats directly to the floor, but I'm gonna be pulling the body off and I'm going to be getting this sandblasted, and my plan is to weld cross members, some aluminum strips on the bottom side, maybe even on the top, that'll be able to bolt through to make sure that these seats are never coming out. So right now, we can slide forward, we can slide backward, we've got a neutral position, and this feels like this is a completely usable place to be. The next step is Dave and I are gonna put together a doghouse. I'm gonna get working on the dash. I've got a pedal assembly to install. That's going to all be in the next episode. So this one is officially over. If you want to see more details on advanced fabrication, I highly recommend you check out Willamette Motor and Fab. David does a terrific job over there. So if that's the kind of content you're interested in, make sure you go give him a subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.